event, Invisible Nation, How to Hold On to Democracy. I'm Vanessa Hope, the director of Invisible Nation, and I'm honored to be your host for this important conversation. Around the world, democratic institutions are under increasing pressure from authoritarian regimes abroad and from internal challenges that test our civic systems and freedoms. Invisible Nation explores one of the most urgent case studies of our time, Taiwan's ongoing effort to preserve its hard-won democracy, autonomy, and freedom in the face of rising external threats. Through unprecedented access to Taiwan's first female president, Tsai Ing-wen, the film captures a nation walking a tightrope between resilience, vulnerability, and hope. This evening, I'm joined by three remarkable voices who each bring deep insight and lived experience to this global conversation. But first, we're going to begin with two. Former Georgia House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams is a leading voice for voting rights, DEI, and civic participation in the United States, who has consistently worked to ensure that democracy is not only preserved, but expanded. She is the host of the podcast, Assembly Required. Her new Substack is called Assembly Notes, and her latest novel, Coded Justice, is out now. Stacey Abrams was the first Black woman in U.S. history to become the gubernatorial nominee of a major political party. She has built a career advancing equity through public service, policy innovation, and storytelling. And Stacey has visited Taiwan in her capacity as a political leader. Michelle Kuo appears in Invisible Nation, reflecting on Taiwan's complex identity and the tension between cultural connection and political autonomy. Michelle brings a deeply personal perspective on what it means to belong and how identity and democracy are intertwined. Michelle is an author, educator, and human rights advocate whose acclaimed memoir, work as a civil rights attorney, and leadership in prison education span the United States, France, and Taiwan. Now based in Taiwan, she and her husband, Albert Wu, have closely documented their experiences there through their Substack, A Broad and Ample Road. Together, we'll explore how Taiwan's story resonates far beyond its borders, what it reveals about the state of democracy today, and how all of us can play a role in defending it wherever we live. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin. Stacey, we are not at the beginning of a move to authoritarianism in the United States. We are really drawing closer to the end, and people need to understand this better. You famously went viral on social media with your 10 steps to autocracy. Can you run us through that?
Sure. And Vanessa, thank you so much for having me. And it's a joy to be with Michelle. And I know we're going to be joined by Representative Crockett later. The 10 steps to autocracy, I want to always give credit to Professor Kim Sheppel at Princeton University, but they're very straightforward. And as you both know, they are not novel. They happen in every nation state that has moved from democracy to autocracy. And they are very clearly evidenced in where we are in the US. And I would argue that we've actually now hit all 10. It starts with a free and fair election. It then moves forward with the executive who is elected, expanding that executive power, as we've seen through executive orders, but also through the firefights and just the absurdity of what we're watching, but is very real. You see the weakening of competing powers. That's the weakening of Congress becoming complicit, the weakening of the judiciary, basically abdicating responsibility. Step 4, you see the attack on government itself, the gutting of government so that people no longer rely on or believe that democracy is a tool for the delivery of services that they've become used to. And that's very important if you want people to shift their allegiance from a democratically orchestrated government to an authoritarian one. Step 5, you install loyalists. And we have seen this happen at every level of government, but in particular in the power positions, the head of the FBI, the head of the Department of Defense, the head of Homeland Security, the head of Health and Human Services, people whose allegiance is not to the people of the country, not to America, it's to the power that they believe is held by the executive. Step 6, the attack on the media, the attack on truth. And I love your t-shirt, your sweatshirt pointing out PBS. Public broadcasting was a clear target because it is one of the few independent media conglomerates that touch every single state and every single community. And so you have to attack not just the media, but attack the truth. It's why They not only went after PBS, they went after Jimmy Kimmel. They went after Stephen Colbert. Step 7 is, I think, the most critical. And it's so critical because in a pluralistic democracy, pluralism is sort of the thing. And that's why they've gone after the vulnerable and the marginalized. It's why they go after DEI. They're not afraid of the letters. This is not an HR play. They're concerned because they understand, as so many on the left do not, that DEI refers to the entire architecture of protections that exist for communities that were not white men who owned land at the start of this nation. And so whether we're talking about race, gender, sexual identity, physical ability, mental ability, all of those things fall under the auspices of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. They revile those principles, which is why they attack them, because you have to scapegoat someone, and DEI is the most efficient scapegoating process in America. That's why they're going after immigrants and communities of color. Step 8, you do your best to make certain that you weaken the support systems that would actually undergird the maintaining of civil society. That's why we've seen attacks on law firms, attacks on universities, but also the purported list of nonprofit organizations and NGOs that are currently facing investigation. It's why protesters are being charged and why they've tried to label certain groups as domestic terrorists, because you have to weaken the support systems that sustain not just protest, but resistance. Because step 9 is that you normalize violence. You see the use of state violence as a tool to enforce dissent and to preclude dissent. And we see that with ICE wearing masks. That's a paramilitary. That is a secret police roaming our streets. We have the military occupation of Washington, D.C., the threatened military occupation of Los Angeles, of Portland, of Memphis, of Chicago. We see Black Hawk helicopters hovering over low-income housing and arresting children. And so all of those things are designed under step 9 to make you afraid to speak up, afraid to dissent. And all of that is in service of step 10, which is when you end democracy forever. And you don't do it by ending elections. Russia has elections. Hungary has elections. Turkey has elections. But you know the outcome of the elections before a single vote is cast. That's why we've watched the takeover of Congress happening in fast motion now, with Texas changing their maps in the middle, Missouri changing their maps, North Carolina just this week changing their maps. They're changing the maps because they want to rig the system so that we have a Duma-style Congress, so that it no longer matters which party you're a part of, because only the party that they preclude, that they prefer, will have the power to make things happen. And so we are in all 10 steps. The issue is they happen both in sequence, but they happen over and over again. It's wash, rinse, repeat until people believe that democracy is no longer worth fighting for. Those are the 10 steps to autocracy and authoritarianism.
Wow. Wow. It's so important that people understand this and hear it over and over again. Thank you. Michelle, can you give this some context in the case of Taiwan? I mean, how did Taiwan manage to overcome autocracy and dictatorship to build their democracy? Was it just about reversing those 10 steps in some sense? And how have you taken that in, living there and being there now after growing up in the US?
Before I answer, I just want to say how glad and honored I am to be on this panel. I'm just very humbled. I'm trying not to fangirl with Stacey Abrams.
I'm fangirling. Stacey Abrams, we can fangirl.
What an inspiring, heroic person. Thank you, Stacey, for speaking truth to power. Yes. Vanessa, your film has meant so much to Taiwanese people who for so long have desired and longed for recognition from the world. So many Taiwanese people, just for people who don't know, it's a total box office hit in Taiwan. So many friends I know have gone to see it. Elders, people, maybe an older generation will go see it twice, first by themselves, and then second to bring their children, their nieces and nephews, their grandchildren. And almost everybody says to me, I know this story of Taiwan, but I still cried through it. And I think they cried because they saw themselves reflected in these protests, from the same-sex marriage protests to the protests against a trade pact with China and the Sunflower Movement. So thank you, Vanessa, for making this film.
Thank you for being in it, Michelle, and guiding us and writing about it.
It means a lot to me. And I cried too. I cried when the Olympics winner for Taiwan said that we're the only Olympics member who cannot fly our own flag, cannot sing our own anthem, cannot say our own name. And I don't think it's an accident that Stacey, I feel like I should say Stacey Abrams to be respectful. Stacey and Representative Crockett are here because they've always cared for marginalized voices wherever they are in the world. To answer your question, all of those steps that Stacey mentioned, from prohibiting dissent to attacking truth to distorting and corrupting what elections mean, all of those happened in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And what I love about the story of Taiwan, and I feel really lucky as a second generation Taiwanese person who didn't grow up knowing much around Taiwan because there are a lot of silences around it. It's a hopeful story. It's an indisputably hopeful story in a world gone totally mad. I mean, we had Pride just Saturday, 150,000 showed up, even though if you've been to Taipei, you know it's very rainy. So every year it rains on Pride and people are out with their rainbow umbrellas, and it's hopeful. And, you know, Taiwan, as we know from your film, Taiwan had the longest period of martial law in history. I hope America won't have that period, but everything that we fear for America has happened in Taiwan, from the disappearing of people, the incarceration of descendants, to the use of informants to the government to create fear. What is the hopeful part of this story? Well, it's in your film, Vanessa. Hundreds of thousands of people showing up in the streets for protest. The pluralistic world. I love how Stacey put it. You're always so eloquent. This architecture of a country is being built in Taiwan, multilingual, multi-ethnic. And just to highlight some of the protests that happened in the 1980s. In the 1980s, so martial law fell in 1987. In the 1980s, there was a protest on the island somewhere every day, whether it was for fishermen, workers' rights, indigenous rights, or student protests for democracy. And then within the 2010s, and this should give us all hope. You know, it takes time to build these coalitions. But in the 2010s, we had also a burst of movements. So one of the movements that most inspired me was indigenous leaders in the eastern coast of Taiwan walked barefoot for 17 days to Taipei to protest the construction of a hotel on their land, because that area is so beautiful. All the developers get very greedy. What's incredible at Taiwan is that protests work. They stopped the action. And if you go to that area in Taiwan, you can still see this half-constructed hotel. They need to demolish it, but at least it never was built. So there is something that is so hopeful about the story of Taiwan, this country that's been colonized by 5 successive regimes and endured a long martial law, and yet has come out to be very multilingual, very active. So
beautifully said, actually. Now I sort of want to ask Stacey Abrams about her speech at the No Kings rally, and the fact that we had a No Kings rally and the weekend you were having the Pride Parade and rally. So maybe we could talk in a hopeful note about what was said there.
Absolutely. And I love how Michelle framed the history of Taiwan, because it's critical that we understand both what we face. It's very real. It's very pertinent. It's very dangerous. We have had people disappeared in this country. We've had mothers seized. We have children who've been detained, but we also are watching families be wrecked by the decisions made about who's being terminated, who's being furloughed. They've shut down the government, not because of a dispute over healthcare, but because they fundamentally do not believe that government is the answer. And we are in a moment where we are deciding the destination of this nation. Are we a destination of pluralistic democracy, or are we on a road to ethno-fascism, Christian nationalism, and a techno bureaucracy? But the route that we take is what matters. And we have chosen the route of democracy. And so if there are 10 steps to autocracy and authoritarianism, what Taiwan has shown us, what your film reveals is that, and reaffirms, is that there are 10 steps to freedom and power. And those 10 steps have worked in every nation state that has successfully pushed back. It's commit first. Know that there's a problem. We have to admit where we are. We cannot have this halcyon view, or more troubling to me, this naivete that this too will pass if we just get to another election. Two, we have to share what we know. And that's why your film is so transformative. It is telling the story, because it's not enough to know yourself. You've got to make sure others know. Then you have to organize. And it doesn't have to be joining the No Kings protest, although 7 million people welcomed you, it's sometimes just finding 3 or 4 or 5 folks and making sure that you're part of those fishermen who were protesting every Thursday because you want your rights to be recognized. And then mobilizing. That's the point. You do something to show that you believe and that you're committed. Yes. Step 5 is that we have to litigate. In the United States and in Taiwan, litigation works. Even if you lose the case, Thurgood Marshall lost dozens of cases before Brown v. Board of Education, before Separate but Equal was eviscerated. We fight because we must, not because we win. Step 6, we have to disrupt. That's why protests matter. That's why strikes matter. That's why boycotts matter. We also have to deny. One of the most important things about the Taiwanese people when I was able to visit Taipei is they refused to let their language and their identity be denied. As long as we hold to our identity and our value systems and we use that language, it's why I talk about DEI. That's one of the steps to freedom and power. And then we have to recognize that we must engage. Those who've been elected or appointed to serve us should be held accountable. But you don't just hope they figure it out. Go tell them what you want. Don't presume they're just ignoring you. Presume they don't know better. And do what you would do with anyone who doesn't know better. Help them do better. And if they refuse, then step 9, you elect people who will. There are 53,000 elections in the United States this year. Participate in one of them. Make sure you make your voice heard. Because ultimately we get to step 10, and that is what is so perfect about Invisible Hope. Invisible Hope is about demanding the world you deserve. And America, we have to demand the world that we deserve. And we have Taiwan as an example that those demands can be met, not on the time frame we always want, and certainly not without sacrifice and harm, but we can have nonviolent demands that actually yield the results that we need.
Beautifully said. It's remarkable. You're both published authors. Stacey Abrams, you're particularly prolific. Is there something about storytelling, something about documentary and film that is particularly good for building a sense of democracy and belonging for people, do you feel? Either one of you, maybe whoever wants to go first.
I will say yes. I mean, you and I were connected by Liz and Dan, who were the producers who helped me do my documentary, All in the Fight for Democracy. Yes. And at the very beginning, you referenced the work I do in democracy and civic participation and DEI. Those are the tools that we use to construct the democracy we need. But we've got to tell people a story that they want to be a part of. Yeah. And the narrative work that you do in this film, the narrative work that Michelle does, as she beautifully paints the story of why carceral restrictions are so dangerous to the notions, not only of democracy, but humanity, why we have to do the work. It's why I use fiction to tell really tough stories. Like I talk about AI and DEI and veterans healthcare. I talk about the energy grid and cryptocurrency. But we've got to get people's imaginations involved if we want their emotions to stay involved. But we also have to paint the picture of what's possible if we do the work.
Wow. Yeah. Michelle, do you have anything to add there?
It's hard. It's always hard to follow up Stacey, but I could just listen to Stacey talk all day. But I absolutely, I mean, Stacey captured it when she said, "Tell your story." And my friend told me, I think that's what Invisible Nation was about when Tsai Ing-wen said, "I say to all Taiwanese people out there," and she could also say their allies, "Go out there and tell people to see Taiwan." And it resonated with me a lot, not only because Taiwan hasn't been recognized internationally, but growing up, I really strongly thought of myself as American. I wasn't that curious about where my parents come from. And I felt that by having solidarity with the most marginalized people within America, I was being the best version of an American. And none of that was wrong. So I worked with undocumented immigrants, with people who were incarcerated, with unhoused people. But when I was around 30, I started to really think about, where do my parents come from? And then all of these interconnected stories of resistance started to actually, these abstract theories like, oh, Black internationalists were going to Indonesia to create Asian Black solidarity. Like, they started to actually be relevant to me. And the more I dug into Taiwanese history, I found our Peng Mingmin, who was incarcerated for his beliefs, was reading about Pan-African nationalism and Pan-African independence movements from the 1960s. Tunju, who you show in the film, who's such a powerful woman, she was reading Nelson Mandela when she was in prison. And so many of the Taiwanese activists draw inspiration from Eastern Europe, which also faces an empire that claims them. And I think your documentary in general, but storytelling more broadly, as Stacey was saying, it helps us realize our stories are always interconnected, no matter where we come from, what country, what race, what faith. We all want to live in a world where we can speak freely, where we don't have to worry that our child is being disappeared by state forces, by fascists. And that message, tell your story, resonates with me really powerfully, that we connect to each other through learning about ourselves and then learning about others.
I love that. And in particular, I'm thinking about the next generation and how we get them excited about democracy and more engaged, because sadly, there is a sense that the Republican Party or MAGA, the right wing, have somehow been successful with their narrative, that it's capturing the minds of the younger generations. And I'm just wondering, you're both such excellent storytellers. How do you see us countering that, or just bringing in the next generation and giving them hope for democracy?
Michelle, I'll let you go first, and then I'm happy to join in.
Well, I'll speak first about Taiwan. I mean, there's been an unprecedented amount of international interest in Taiwan, I think, in Taiwan's lifetime. Vanessa's film is the first documentary film made by a non-Taiwanese person to really portray its struggle. And even someone like me who grew up second gen with this very 1990s idea that I don't want to be a hyphenated American, I'm going to be American, I've rejected that sort of blindness that I used to have. And so Taiwanese American communities, which have been fighting, I should say, in America for a very long time, have started to succeed in teaching us about our history. But more broadly about America, in terms of what gives us hope, I think everything Stacey said about the 10 steps of freedom, when we actively participate in our world, hope is possible, whether it means shielding an undocumented immigrant from being arrested, whether it means to show up to protest every day and calling and participating in elections. Always the key to hope is connection with others, and connection with people we might not, connection with people who don't necessarily share our background.
Actually, I can add a little nuance to that, Stacey, before giving it to you, because I think one of the exciting observations I made learning about Taiwan was how many young people are actually interested in getting involved in their government, becoming politicians, legislators, leaders, not just participating in protests and movements, but founding parties and getting engaged. And when I look at the United States government, not only do I see too many white men, but I see they're all very old, and I see they're hanging on and not giving way. And it's harder to feel that we encourage and invite young people to get that actively involved and actually get into government. So maybe you can also help us better understand what's going on in the US in that sense.
So, and I appreciate you framing it that way. So let's level set with numbers. We know that there was a market shift among Gen Z voters, shifting from the left to the right. So President Biden enjoyed a 25-point margin among young voters in 2020, and Harris had a 4-point margin based on exit polls. And we have to know exit polls are worth what the paper they're printed on. And we also have to recognize that we have a low participation rate among young people. So around 30 to 50%, but we only have about 30% of them who are actually registered. So let's take all of that into context.
Yeah.
We've also watched a precipitous drop in their support for Trump from 94% down to like 69% amongst those who are paying attention. But it's still concerning because we have to remember that this is a generation, Gen Z, they were born between 97 and 2012. So the very oldest of them were born the year before he got elected the first time. So their memory of him they were born in 97. So the first president that they could have voted for would have been 2016.
Yep.
What we have to do is not just talk about what's at stake, but what is possible. And we spend, I think, too much time lingering in fear as a motivator instead of lingering in and highlighting what's possible. The state that animates me the most is the state of Minnesota. Minnesota had a 62% participation rate among young voters between the ages of 18 and 24 in the 2024 election.
Wow.
62%. But that's a state where they had free lunch for schools for the first time, where they had reproductive freedom, where you saw the state take action on environmental degradation, where you saw the state take action on social justice issues. That's what animated them. And so I think what we should take is not this loss of opportunity, but telling not just a better story, but connecting the story to active engagement and delivery. Democracy works when we deliver. Duterte was able to wrest power in the Philippines because people saw the drug trade taking the lives of their friends, taking the lives of their family members. And he said, I'm going to do something draconian and horrible because the state wasn't working. We have to recognize that the fear is real, but so is the opportunity. And that's why Invisible Nation is so important. And I called it Invisible Hope earlier just because Vanessa Hope Invisible, but that's your sequel.
Good catch.
That's a good title. I like that title.
But I would say that the real piece for me is that the hope that Michelle describes, the nation that you so beautifully lay out, is the story of what's possible. And if we want young people to be engaged, it cannot be lip service. And it also can't be, we need you on Tuesday. It's got to be, we need you every day before an election day. We want to hear from you before election day. We want you to tell us what to do before election day. And even better, we want to help you do it before election day. My work has always centered around, again, those three component pieces of how we deliver democracy. But I know I'm doing right when I have young people around me who know more, who are skeptical of what I'm thinking about, and who challenge me to be better. I also have nieces and nephews who are not at all impressed with me, and that helps too. But overall, it's this belief that I have that it's not just telling a good story, but it's inviting others in to tell their story too, giving them the microphone, giving them the platform, but also giving them the power to build what they need.
Wow, that was so beautifully said. I actually have an unscripted series idea I'm going to talk to you about after this that I've given Dan and Liz that's right in sync with everything you just said that maybe will be hopeful for.
I look forward to it.
Okay. I'm mindful that you have 2 minutes left, Stacey, and if there was anything that you wanted to add or share about actions people can take to strengthen and hold on to democracy, we would love to hear it.
Well, as I walk through the 10 steps to autocracy and authoritarianism and the 10 steps to freedom and power, I didn't expect you to take notes. I need everyone to go and sign up at 10stepscampaign.org. It's 10stepscampaign.org. And the first thing you do is put in your information. But the next thing I need you to do is take that second step and actually share it. The whole point is that we're trying to build a framework that reflects what Taiwan proved so beautifully, that we don't all have to do the same thing, whether it's the unhoused or undocumented immigrants, whether it is fishermen, whether we're talking about mothers, we can all do something. We don't have to do the same thing, but we can all do something. And the 10 Steps campaign is designed to bring us together into community. We have to belong before we believe. And I want to invite you to belong to the 10 Steps campaign, however it works for you, whatever you need to do. But let's get it done because that's how we can save our democracy. And Vanessa, just thank you so much for having me here today. Michelle, it's always a joy to see you.
I'm so happy.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And we loved having you. I understand that we have Jasmine in the green room. Jasmine Crockett, Representative
Leader A.
All right.
It's an honor to see you, Representative.
Yes.
I'm lucky I get to escape now before she blows us all out of the water.
No, not at all. You guys have had a treat. She is truly one of the most brilliant minds that is walking this earth. So I'm sure everyone learned a lot from listening to you.
Well, Jasmine Crockett is the embodiment of the 10 steps to freedom and power. So I'm gonna let her take it away.
Yes.
Okay.
First, Representative Jasmine Crockett, I want to give you an introduction because I've given that to everybody else. And we're so happy to have you here. You are a passionate advocate for justice and accountability, bringing fresh urgency to the fight for democratic protections in today's America. As the youngest Black lawmaker and the only Black freshman in her legislative session, You spearheaded landmark criminal justice reforms, filed more bills than any other freshman, and continue to be a leading voice for underrepresented communities in Congress. And you have a social media and a Substack. We're encouraging everyone to follow everyone on our panel here. You have actually visited Taiwan in August 2024 as part of a U.S. House delegation meeting with President Lai and participating in official activities to support the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. And your visit underscored the bipartisan support for Taiwan and highlighted shared democratic values. So thank you for joining us, and apologies if you've had trouble getting here, but we're really happy to have you, and Michelle. So actually, maybe, I don't know if you want to start with reflections on your visit to Taiwan, if they're fresh at all, but if you felt any solidarity between the struggle for democracy that's ongoing in Taiwan and the struggle for democracy that's ongoing here. I don't know if that's in your mind at all, or what you experienced in Taiwan. I think we'd love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So my apologies. I'm flying today, so I'm in a hotel room. And so we had a few issues, as many people are experiencing nowadays with the government shutdown. So Taiwan is a really important place, specifically for Texans. We have just this kind of unique connection, whether we started off by talking about chips, because when we think of chips, they originated right there in Texas. But then ultimately, Taiwan is the king of chips now. And so we've always had kind of this special relationship. And the reason that I bring up chips is because you can't talk about the safety of any democracy while then not having a conversation about the economic stability of that area. And I bring it up because sometimes people throw these things into silos. But the very first thing that we've seen we've seen a lot of various aggression as it relates to China and Taiwan, but is them having kind of this space carved out to do chips, as well as they have this huge kind of agricultural presence as well. And we've seen China try to kind of limit their ability to be self-sufficient by kind of playing games around their agriculture. And I say all these things because I want people to see the connections. I want them to understand that when we put ourselves into an economic corner, that does not help us as relates to the stability of our democracy. In addition to that, when we talk about agriculture, most people kind of think of, we've got farmland and then we've got urban cities. And I tell people all the time, I don't really care if you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent, everybody got to eat. So we should all care about what is taking place when it comes to rural America. And I've heard lots of sentiments about, the farmers and things like that. And, because generally speaking, I will not put it on all farmers, but when we look at rural America, they have tended to vote for people that are pushing the policies that are disproportionately impacting them negatively. They voted for people that are not doing right by them. And so some people say, well, it's farming and, there's land and we can always grow stuff and whatever. As the president has said, we can go to Argentina and get our beef. Forget those that are right here, those ranchers. Forget them. We'll just go to Argentina and buy theirs and try to bail them out. And one of the things that we used to say all the time on the Ag Committee is that this is a matter of national security. And anytime you put yourself into a situation where you're relying on someone else to feed your people, that is a problem. Right now we have record bankruptcy filings by farmers. So while I know people are still very much upset and feel like, you know what, we had it right, we had a great candidate, all you had to do was do right, and doing right meant doing right for your own family. You should have been selfish and voted in the interest of future generations. It's tough, but Taiwan, we're supposed to be ahead of Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it feels as if we are retrogressing, and we should look at some of those democracies that are still kind of fighting for their full independence, and their right to exist fully. We should look at them and their struggles and know that that could be us really soon if we don't kind of self-correct.
Well said. That is so true. And there's another documentary that's out right now that Michelle in her Substack has written a really good post comparing our film Invisible Nation with A Chip Odyssey, which is really looking at the evolution of the chip industry in Taiwan and why it is so cutting edge. And I think the hope, and it's a very important subject you've raised, is that that economic industry is going to be a bulwark against any kind of invasion, whether by China or the US not supporting Taiwan, that it will support because it cares about chips. But Michelle is on the ground in Taiwan, and Michelle has seen both these films and she's written about them beautifully. Michelle, do you have any thoughts on where Taiwan is with these ideas right now and economically?
Well, before I answer your question, I just want to tell Representative Crockett I admire your work so deeply. I also was a lawyer for defendants and incarcerated people, and so I know that work is so rewarding, so uphill. You're always fighting a narrative that's against you. So, thank you for your work. Thank you for fighting for the most important issues. Access to food stamps are going to be cut off in November, access to housing, and a safer world. And Representative Crockett just said just now, that could be us about, you were just describing Taiwan's struggle so beautifully that we have a right to exist fully in the world. And that the U.S. is supposed to be ahead of Taiwan. And this is one of those things that is happening in the past 10 years. I met this father-daughter pair, and the daughter is heading to the U.S. She's like 22, heading to the U.S. to get a master's degree. And we were giving her all this advice. If you don't want to get arrested, say this, don't say this, carry your visa on you all the time. And the dad had also gone to Taiwan the Taiwanese dad had gone to the U.S. 30 years earlier and said, I can't believe I'm saying this to my daughter. When I went to the U.S., it was to be free. He was like, I was so happy to leave this world in Taiwan where there are secret informants and where we're still just after martial law. And now I'm telling my daughter to be so careful when she goes to the U.S. And now we have people all over the world coming to Taiwan to study because it's one of the freest places in the world. And as somebody who grew up in America, I feel really devastated about it. But I feel also energized by the activism of Representative Crockett and Stacey Abrams, who tell us that we cannot afford to be hopeless. So I want to thank Representative Crockett for laying out that picture for us. I mean, this is where we stand right now, and this question of diversifying our sources, our sources of economic vitality is also Taiwan's issue. And Vanessa, your film that shows this amazing, heartbreaking, inspiring footage of 500,000 people on the streets to protest a trade pact with China, which would essentially absorb Taiwan economically. I mean, imagine Chinese publishers buying out Taiwanese publishers and newspapers. At that point, you're eliminating all criticism of the Chinese Communist Party. You're eliminating all the books that exist of social movements in the world. You're eliminating all of the books and press about not just Taiwan, but Tibet, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong. So thinking about how these struggles are interconnected and learning ways to stay economically independent and to use the people we have, rural farmers, and to take them seriously. And I just really, I really appreciate Representative Crockett's comments, which seem to understand, which get at the heart of the big picture. So thank you.
They really do. I want to keep it even more big picture and ask Representative Crockett, there are so many threats to our democracy right now. I mean, to prioritize them is challenging, especially in your position where you can actually do something and take action. But can you give us some big picture sense? What do you think are the major threats to our democracy right now?
Yeah, for me, it's our access to the ballot box. I think everything starts there. And so when we look at the fact that once they were able to gut the Voting Rights Act, and now we're still waiting on the court to determine whether or not it's going to continue to gut the Voting Rights Act and get it Section 2. We know that Section 4 and Section 5 are gone. And so, by the time you get to 2, I mean, we already are hanging by a thread, that there's not good clearance in some of those other things. But also just the idea that this president is putting pressure on state legislatures, and without any input from the people of those states, they are then going and they are taking power. Like, they are just about rigging the system. And the reason that I say that has to be the most important, because that's exactly what they're going for. They're going for the heart of it. These are the same people that wanted to make sure that they could limit people getting water at the polls. So you have to understand how vital voting is to a democracy and access. That is how you access the ballot box. And it is the only thing that democratizes us, whether you're super rich or whether you are struggling. You are equal when it comes to the ballot box, so long as we make sure that there's equal access. But you don't get healthcare, you don't get smart foreign affairs, you don't get education, you don't get any issues around Social Security or healthcare. You don't get those things without actually giving the people an opportunity to get their representation. So for me, it's voting rights, because everything comes through that.
Yep. And in fact, Michelle, you probably witnessed this, but Taiwan has not only tremendous voter participation, but they count the ballots by hand. I don't know if that's everywhere, Michelle, but it's like such a ritual and it's such an engaging process. Like, people are very proud of that in Taiwan. I don't know if you can speak to that, but
Yeah, it's amazing to go on voting days and to watch everybody hold up the ballot. So people will all be gathered to watch them tallying on the board. It's like very old school, and it emerges because of corruption at the ballot box that would occur so basically in the 1970s, where they had basically fake elections, the lights would suddenly go off. And that's when a lot of the ballot box corruption would happen, like ballots would get tossed or disappeared. And then I met these old school guys, and I love it when I meet these people who in the 1970s, they were student activists, and they would take their flashlights and they would go to protect these places, and they would flash into the ballot counting areas whenever the electricity mysteriously went out. And so that's where that practice emerges. But we have incredible voter turnout in Taiwan, and there is very stable system. And I'm really alarmed to see all of the gerrymandering, even more intensive gerrymandering happening across the country, including Texas.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because as you talk about, how advanced Taiwan is, and then how much like the United States has to do. It's my understanding, if I'm remembering correctly, y'all just had a woman president.
yes,
Your current president is not a woman, but y'all just literally had a woman president. And somehow the United States is still like, hey, we're not going to do that, right? And your amazing vice president, I promise she is a favorite just kind of across the board. She was an amazing ambassador who was able to build these amazing relationships, to the extent that yes, getting a bipartisan group of people to go to Taiwan and have nothing but high praise for your vice president, which I was like, I miss you, but this is very cool that you're the vice president.
You have such great taste. She's my favorite too, Michelle. She's so beloved. Some people say she was elected. It was the reason I was elected was because of her, but I don't want to get in trouble for saying that. I shouldn't have just said that live. But yeah, she's amazing. Yeah.
No, she's absolutely fantastic. And we'd gotten there kind of soon after the elections. So we did have a lot of conversations about interference with the elections, you know, doing things online. Some of those guys that tend to play and they're bots and they get amplified on certain social media platforms. Yeah, we had conversations about that. And these are the things like we don't really talk about a lot because I don't think that the average voter understands that we literally are diplomats that like need to go around the world and come up with smart trade policies. So a lot of times before we had, you know, the crazy old uncle in the White House, we would do things like try to figure out how we could diversify supply chains with people that we consider to be our friends, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at an ally, when you're looking at like a Taiwan, then it's a matter of like, is there a way for us to actively support our friend, right? To hopefully make sure that they are economically strong, to put them in the best position if anything is to happen. And now we are like, I don't even know what to say about our trade. Like I have no words for like what's going on. And I wish most Americans understood when he was saying that he was going to impose the tariffs, like what that meant and understood how tariffs are supposed to be used. Yeah. And the fact is he's abusing that right now. But you're right. Your vice president did such great work over here, building really a very, very strong relationship where she would have bipartisan dinners at the embassy, and she made it clear that she was apolitical, which is what they're supposed to be. She is Taiwan, Taiwan, Taiwan. And so she was always very clear on how much trade we did. She had been to Texas a number of times because of how much we do. So we've been able to actually meet up in Texas as well. But you guys are really, really, really blessed to have her. And I think because of the work that she did prior to swearing in at her new post, I think that will bode well for the country.
That was so beautifully said. And I have to say, we are so blessed to have you, Representative Crockett, in this country. And to be mindful of time, because I'm grateful you were able to make it, but I don't want to take your time. And this is when we're supposed to kind of wrap up. If there is one action, two actions you want to tell our audiences to take to hold on to democracy in the U.S., Representative Crockett, and in Taiwan, Michelle Kuo, please let us know what you think that is.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely don't become hopeless. When you become hopeless, that is when they win. Continue to fight, 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 fight. And recognize when you're being distracted. So when there's all this kind of craziness, figure out what is really most important and make sure that you're sharing that information with your circle. Do not assume that because someone has a certain level of education, whether it's a high level or not so much formal education, don't assume that anybody knows anything or that anyone knows everything. Just share truth in as many ways as you can, because they are winning with disinformation and misinformation and flat out lies. So please make it your point to be a truth teller and don't minimize your impact and say, well, I'm not a politician. Every single one of you has power and has influence, and we need you all to use it.
Thank you. That's so well said and inspiring. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
So beautiful. And if I could just say, Representative Crockett, you and our vice president are very similar. You both have backgrounds where she was able to flip a notoriously difficult district when she was coming up as a representative. She could talk to any voter. She was not ideologically bound. She could connect. She could flip rural folks to her side, and that's what you're doing. I find that so amazing and inspiring. And I want to just touch on two things Representative Crockett said as my final word, because they're actually perfect. First is that in the history of Taiwan's democracy, women have always showed up.
Yeah.
You know, when I was growing up in the U.S., I was very U.S. centric. And it's amazing to me to find out that we have our own Representative Crockett's and Stacey Abrams all over Taiwan. We saw that in your film, Vanessa, where most of the leaders you interviewed were women, women who evolved and grew from, who were politicized. And the second thing Representative Crockett said that I just want to emphasize, because I said we do have fair elections here, but there's no doubt that China interferes with it. Every single day, we have 2.4 million cyber attacks. Wow. We have influencers who are paid off to divide people here, to create distrust, to make you believe your government doesn't provide services, even though we have universal health care and a great transportation infrastructure and high quality public education. And this is the tactic, of course, in the United States as well. And so Taiwanese people are even if the ballot box is not corrupt, we face a lot of challenges every single day, and they do create a sense of hopelessness. But I have to echo what Representative Crockett said so eloquently, is that we can't afford to lose hope. And look how much we've been able to build. Yeah. Our stories are so interconnected in Taiwan and the U.S. and across the world. And I just feel, I feel invigorated by the work that everybody is doing. And thank you, Representative Crockett, for all your tireless work, for speaking truth to power.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for making an incredible film that Taiwan.
For being in it, Michelle. Thank you for helping me and guiding me. Yes. I have concluding remarks to make. I don't know if you guys have to stay on screen and listen to me, or whether I just thank you and you get to leave, or I'm getting a once they finish. No, I'll be concluding in a minute. So I guess I'm just thanking you both for being here. Okay, now I guess I conclude. I'm going to conclude. Michelle, it's great to see you. Thank you so much to our incredible speakers, former Georgia House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams, Representative Jasmine Crockett, and Michelle Kuo for sharing your insight, passion, and conviction with us tonight. Invisible Nation reminds us that democracy is not something we can take for granted. It's something we must defend and continually reimagine together. Taiwan's story is both urgent and universal, showing how courage, identity, and civic participation are at the heart of any free society. As part of the next phase of our release, we're planning a national PBS broadcast, a nationwide university screening tour, and many special events with policymakers and think tanks. And this, by the way, is one of a 6-event screening series. So tune in on November 9th when we will be joined by more incredible panelists, Scott Nakagawa, Van Jackson, and Catherine Leela Cho, for a conversation on how to fight authoritarianism. But if you'd like to learn more about how to be impactful and contribute in any way, get involved with our campaign and film, you can check out our page, invisiblenation.net/outreach, and you'll find contact details for our colleagues at Show and Tell. And to everyone who joined, thank you for being a part of this conversation. Please continue to share the film, talk about it within your communities, and take action wherever you can. You'll find resources and more about upcoming screenings also on our website. On behalf of the Invisible Nation team, thank you again for spending your evening with us. Let us carry the spirit of tonight forward and keep holding on to and strengthening our democracies. Good night.